We're about ready to start, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome. Welcome to the first block of concurrent sessions of the 97th LOC conference, and specifically, Reimagining Leadership. My name is Kevin Toon. I'm the communications director for the LOC. Oh, wow, thank you. 18 years, that's not bad. Thanks. Today's session is being sponsored generously by HomeServe, and at this time I'd like to invite Dennis Lyon, Regional Manager for HomeServe, to say a few words. Dennis?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. It is an honor to be a sponsor of this session, Reimagining Leadership. It's also an honor to have been a business partner of the League of Oregon Cities for, I think, almost 6 years now. I enjoy coming to these events. I'm so glad that we're able to have this annual event in person again. It's great to see faces and talk to people and not have conversations with myself as much. So, reimagining leadership. I think when I think of that, one of the ways that or things that comes to my mind is maybe looking for ways that you can help that residents in your community that you didn't think that you would be able to. And our program, we're the administrators of the National League of Cities Service Line program, and I think that's one of those ways that you can take a look outside the box in a leadership standpoint of how to make things better in your community for your residents. I know we have some of our partner cities in here. I see Cottage Grove, I think I see Hermiston, Jefferson, and so on. We're working with 23 different communities currently. Basically what we do is we partner with the municipality at no cost to the municipality to proactively educate your residents that they're responsible for the water and sewer line on their property, and then we make available to them completely voluntary protection that they can participate in to either eliminate or mitigate the financial shock of dealing with those issues. It helps out from a staff level of not having those negative interactions with your residents, because typically when they have a problem, that's the first time they're finding out they're responsible for it as well. So I'm in exhibit number 6 near the registration desk. If you'd like to come by and see me and talk a little bit more, I'd be happy to speak with you. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to MC Toon and let him take over.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, that's the first time I've been called that. No rapping will commence from this point. I'm going to let the entertainers be the entertainers. I'll just introduce Dennis. Thank you, HomeServe, for being a generous sponsor, as he mentioned, going back several years. So I'm going to introduce today's speakers now. With us today are Jessica Moll-Heilman and Nina Vetter, almost called you my friend Nina's name. Jessica is the director of Portland State University's Center for Women's Leadership, and Nina is the current city manager for the city of Gresham. Please join me in welcoming Jessica and Nina.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us after lunch, and welcome to our session. So if I can get a raise of hands, who in here is a council member, mayor, elected official? Okay, many of you. How about city manager or city officials? Yeah, all right, we got a good mix. Love it. So help me understand. Do you have dreams for your community? Yes. Do you want your community to be even better than it is today? Yes. Do you have things you want to accomplish because you ran for office to get stuff done? Great, you're in the right spots. Yes, let's do this thing. So Jessica and I are here today to talk about how do we do this in this complex world we live in, and we want to give you tools and resources and tips on how to get these great things done for your community in this environment we're in. But we're gonna start today by role modeling something, and some of you may already do this practice or might be familiar with it, but it's grounding and taking a second before you step into that difficult meeting, maybe before you show up to a council meeting, you're getting ready to have a hard conversation, you just had a hard conversation. How do we make sure in this crazy world with all the noise, right? There's a lot of noise going around. How do we make sure we show up and be present and ready as leaders to do the very important work that you do and make incredibly important decisions for your community? So we're gonna do this together, so everyone pay attention to directions. What I want you to do is place your feet firmly on the ground if they're not. You're gonna take your hands, maybe they're on your phones, maybe they're somewhere else. You're gonna rest them on your lap. Very good. Okay. And slowly, I'm going to ask you to just close your eyes. If you want to hang your head, you can do that as well. That's up to you. And what we're going to do first is we're going to squeeze our shoulders up to our ears as tight as possible, and then release them down. And we're going to do that again. Up. Exhale. Down. Okay, one more time, because your shoulders are getting relaxed, I can tell. Yes, and down. Very good. Okay, now we're going to do a little breathing. Stay eyes closed. Stay where you are. You're going to inhale for 4 breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale out 8. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Repeat. In for 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Last time. 4, 3, 2, 1. Out. 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now blink your eyes open slow. Do we feel slightly more present than we did about 30 seconds ago? Maybe some of you yes, some of you no. Some of you are like, let's never do that again. That's fine. This is just an example. And it might not do anything for you. I'll just say this. It might not do anything for you, but you might be meeting with people who are coming into a situation where they're stressed out, they have other things on their mind, they just got a really crappy email, and they need it. So even if you don't need it as the leader in that meeting or that room, someone else might just need those 30 seconds. Let the stuff go, get focused, let's get to work. So an example of what you can do to help ground and make sure that you're present and that your people that you're meeting with. So with that, let's get kicked off. Jessica is up.
Well, thanks, Nina, and thanks, MC Kevin, wherever you now are. Appreciate being kicked off. How's the volume? I'm a loud talker, so I like to check in with folks that I'm not yelling at you because I had coffee and I'm getting to that point in the day where the caffeine is really leveling out and I'm kicking. So I just wanted to add a couple comments on why a city manager and a person from academia might be hanging out together and thinking about reimagining leadership. So for about the last year, Nina and I have become kind of brunch and happy hour friends to kind of noodle on these kinds of things. And within my role, I have the privilege of working with emerging leaders primarily and coming through the New Leadership Oregon program, which has taken place for 19 years in our state and is open to college-enrolled women and gender-expansive students at any Oregon college or university. So think of those emerging leaders in your life. I'm one of these people that I would really love to connect with you if that demographic comes to mind of emerging leaders that are on your team or your interns or maybe in your personal life as well. New Leadership Oregon is an annual conference that brings together a cohort of about 40 students to think about the concept of leadership, to explore different ways of how they themselves are leaders and kind of have that jumping off point to really start acting on their potential to lead or continue leading, depending on where they're at in their journey. So I just wanted to give a little context of one of the main programs that I operate within, and we've had over, now we have music. I love that. Okay, not our slides, but very exciting. We've had over 600 people go through that program. And so some of the times when I'm chatting about, things that we're hearing from the emerging workforce, those are the folks that I'm in conversation with every day. And those folks, I would say, are not the average age of college students. We've had 19 years of programs. So we have folks that are kind of mid-career to getting that first job. So those were some of my findings and what I'm bringing into this conversation today. So just wanted to give a little bit of context to that and give a little bit of I would say, emerging format because we're going to adapt to kind of the energy in the room. As Nina already mentioned, we got you all after lunch. That's either a great time where you're like all of the calories are kicking in, you're digesting and like feeling good, or maybe you're like, okay, a nap would be really nice at this point in the day. So we're going to try to kind of read the room as we go along, and we're going to ask to invite you into a little bit of vulnerability to engage with each other as we do that. So I wanted to start with thinking about tenacious fatigue. I don't know about all of you, but we're kind of at that point in the pandemic, yes, still the pandemic, where we're kind of getting beyond burnt out. And I hope that resonates with a few of you in the audience as well. It's like we've been kind of, okay, like I get it, like good leaders don't waste a crisis. I need to rethink about how I do this. We're gonna adapt, we're gonna pivot, we're gonna find the new normal, we're gonna do all that. I promise we're not gonna talk about how to do the new normal. I promise you that. That's not part of the conversation today. It's just adapting to the context that you're currently in. And what I mean by tenacious fatigue is that it gets us to this point, excuse me, also apparently losing my voice today. It gets us to this point where we're spliced in our ability to listen. We're tired, we're responding out of fear, we may be engaging with people that are responding out of fear, either constituents and members of your community or people on your own team. And if you go farther into that kind of slippery slope spiral, if you will, you can really get to a place where it's just spliced listening and kind of a place of despair. And so I hope that resonates with some folks around kind of maybe where some of you are at and where some of the members of your team are. And it's like, okay, we're burnt out. We're dealing with this quiet quitting. We're dealing with this maybe a great resignation, maybe not, still be determined if that's actually a thing or not, depending on where the data is coming from. And so what do you do with all of that? So we hope to take some time to kind of think about what is leadership in this moment and what have we learned from the last few years that you can bring into this moment. So we'll do that by talking about the work environment, we'll talk about engaging the community, and then also what is it now taking to lead. And we'll try to leave you with some kind of quick takeaways that you could put into action. And of course, there's a lot of different types of folks in this room and a lot of leadership styles, so not all of those will resonate with you. But we hope that you take a couple things back with you that maybe you can go ahead and implement in that next back-to-back meeting day with you and your team.
Thank you. I love this quote, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Has anyone seen that before? Yeah. And so as we're moving through changing times, and as we all want to see positive change in our community, we can't just keep doing things the way they've always been done, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about that today and get into it. But before we do that, so we're going to do another exercise with each other. And this is a great opportunity for you to get to know someone new, sure, but also this is a very intentional exercise that we're going to do today. Because we are going to talk to each other about our whys, why we ran for office, why we serve in leadership, why we believe in the work that we do. And it is a helpful exercise and thing to circle back to, particularly when you're in conflict. And that's maybe when you're in conflict with some of your members on your council, your community, people on your team. Going back to the why are we here to serve? Because you will find common ground somewhere when you start talking about why you show up and why you care so much. So it really can be a helpful tactic. And also give a plug, recently in Gresham, we have a lot of conflict in our community, as I'm sure a lot of you do. And so we had a community conversation that was really about why. Why do we show up? Why are we getting involved? Why do we care? And it was really beautiful to see some of those walls come down. That had been very political, just having the conversation about why. So what we're going to ask you to do is you can pick someone next to you if you would like, but if you know that person, preferably find a new buddy and have a quick conversation and share. It could be why you ran for office, why you felt called to serve, or why you're in your leadership position. You're going to share with each other, and then we're going to bring you back. You're going to have like 7 minutes total, so please don't give your 20-minute political rant. It's not the time. Do that at home. Again, you can move tables. You can stand up and do it. I'll leave the format up to you for whatever works best, and we'll call you back in 7 minutes. Go time.
We did the classic thing where we got everybody talking and then no one really wanted to stop talking because they found someone really interesting to have a conversation with, which is great. And we want that to continue happening through, first day, getting more into the conference. Hopefully you've connected with somebody that maybe you'll get to continue the conversation today or throughout your time here. And I thought, we should probably give a ground rule, because as you might have guessed, this won't be the first time that we have you do some type of activity throughout our time. Again, we're after lunch. We knew we were after lunch. We got to keep the audience going. And so what we'll use so that Nina and I are not, yelling at you to break your connection and conversation, we'll just raise our hand. And then we'll just ask as folks notice that we're raising our hand that you also start raising your hand, and it will just signal folks to come back together. So just want to introduce that as kind of a norm for our conversation today. And I forgot my clicker. All right, so the very first thing that we wanted to kind of chat on a little bit is getting the work done. How do you get the work done in an environment where people have been like working remote, they've been kind of all over the place, hybrid, some of your employees never went home. It's kind of a little bit of everything, everywhere, all at once. So we just wanted to chat a little bit about, what has the pandemic allowed us to think about differently? And you may already be reflecting on that, but we're trying to give you a real-time opportunity to think about that a little bit more this afternoon. And particularly around thinking about where to go from here with your team. If your organization is like mine, we've got different unions, we've got folks that want to come back 5 days a week, 8 to 5, not very many of them, but some of them. And we've got folks that are wanting the flexibility that they've really learned and received over the last few years and have adapted to. So, if you try to go back to the way that it's always been done, or back to normal, there was a phase in the pandemic where folks were saying, we're going back to normal. And I think what we've seen is that we've seen workplace churn, maybe higher than we've ever really seen that. I just had a colleague text me this last week that said, I finally filled this role, and then that person quit, and then the temp showed up and they quit on their first day. And I just thought, oh gosh, if this, and I see some glimpses and some body language that tells me that folks are having those types of experiences. And so we're coming up against work environment expectations, but the expectation of the workforce has kind of changed because they said, well, I've done my job at home for the last 2+ years. Why do I need to come back? And I know that folks are having variations of that conversation. It's also hard to attract talent. I think we're seeing, particularly when I'm having conversations with emerging leaders who are just getting started in the workplace, the expectations are different. What they want from the workplace is values alignment, that flexibility, being able to think about, flexible hours, working on their time. What do you do with that, and how do you start making some expectations around that? And then if you try to do everybody come back and this is the rules, we know that that puts you in a position as a leader to kind of be the authoritative parent figure, and that often doesn't turn out very well. It causes some separation from you and your team and maybe breaks some of the trust that they felt that you had in them to get the work done, especially since you've probably been encouraging and getting them to think about how to do the work differently for the last couple of years, and now you're saying, nope, it's over, come back. So it is kind of, what do you do within that? And I think again, kind of the spiral that you can get down is that by breaking that trust and becoming this kind of parental figure in your work relationships, is that you end up straining collaboration and the possibility to be creative. And you may end up making a diminishing environment, which means that people kind of rise to the new occasion that you have set for them and are doing less. And that may resonate a little bit differently depending on if you're coming into a new team or if you're trying to bring back together a team that you were working with during the pandemic. And I just want to hand back over the mic to Nina to share a little bit of some survey results.
Yeah, thank you. We did a survey recently of Oregon city managers and asked about recruitment and retention and what good tips our managers have in their experience on how to keep people and how to attract people to the organization. And what we continue to hear and experience is that flexibility and a good work culture is key to recruitment and retention. And we all know, because we work in it, we need great people. Or we're not going to get all these great projects done. We're not going to have a great community. And what I also want to touch on is we got a little bit into what does flexibility in a good work environment look like? Because some people think flexibility equals you work at home or you don't. There's a lot of other variations of what flexibility looks like. It might be I need to leave at 4:30 to go pick my kid up. It might be I need to take a longer lunch so that I could go check on my mother. Right? There's a variety of what flexibility looks like to support our people. I know everyone has a personal opinion on flexibility and whether they like to work from home or they like to be in the office. For example, I work better in my office, but that's just me. That doesn't mean that works for my whole team, right? And so understanding even our own personal opinion of what we like or what we think is how it should be that naturally is conflicting with the workforce that we have today. And if we're not adaptive, if we're not providing the flexibility, we're not going to be able to retain and recruit great people, and therefore we're not going to get great work done. So it's so imperative, instead of trying to fight it, you might not like it, that's okay, but fighting it's not going to solve for it. What we need to do is balance, as we have up here, the flexibility with the accountability, and making sure that we're setting expectations and standards so that when we offer flexibility, that person can be successful. They can be successful working and getting the work done in the flexible work environment. So I'm turning back over to Jessica.
We're going to get our steps in doing the mic trade back and forth. So that's good. We're making you all do activities. We're also getting our movement in after lunch. So glad that we're in it together this afternoon. Thank you for going over some flexibility. So you might see some words up here that may be familiar for some or may be new to others. And again, some of this is going to resonate and some of it might not, depending upon how many people are on your team and how much flexibility you have within your organization. Because I recognize that depending on the size of your organization, and you may not really have any say over some of the decisions of how we're bringing people back. Or you were the person that sent the email and now has to role model, okay, what does it mean we're making people come back to the office? What's the plan, the comeback plan, if you will? I spoke with some leaders. I said, okay, this is actually one of my favorite questions to ask people right now. So you want people to come back to the office. You want some consistency and normalcy. What's your plan to have that conversation with your people? I hope it's not just a mass email out. I hope that you are having conversations with people and leading different teams to say, how are you addressing the needs that have changed? And when I think about that, I think about people's mental health and just where they're at and what they've been through. That's different for everybody over the last couple of years. And what is your leadership's team's role in addressing some of those needs and applying flexibility to what some of those needs are and making sure that they know the resources that are available. I also think a lot about caregiving. Caregiving has changed for a lot of people, not just kind of traditional caregiving of thinking about like a mom and children, which did have a huge impact. And I would think that everybody in this room can think of somebody who was impacted by childcare and the lack thereof or the change of during the pandemic, or maybe still, because I still talk to folks every day who are like, I can't figure out consistent childcare, things have changed, things shut down, and it's having a huge impact on what flexibility might mean to somebody. So again, instead of making that an authoritative, like, here's the email top down, great, I sent the message out, everybody knows the rules, we're gonna move on, it's making sure that you're equipping everybody in leadership roles and caring with them, how are we gonna bring people back together so that we can get the work done? And and those can be as simple as co-creating the norms and the expectations. I'm gonna guess that all of your cities have maybe some values, some kind of core, here's kind of what we're about to our community. But have you taken the time to have that conversation with your team? And not just the leadership team, because then it still ends up being top down, but with kind of the pods that are working together and getting projects done. What are these values gonna mean to us now? Okay, so we've got some people working from home, some people wanting to come back into the office. Is there an agreed upon day? Some of you might have already done that, like we're gonna do 1 day a week, or we're gonna do 1 day a month, where everybody we want to have together. And what can really be your role? And then again, instead of coming to the meeting and saying, here's my 5 bullet points about how we're gonna come back and how we're gonna do this and how we're gonna adapt to this new environment, let's have a conversation and create those together. And it really brings people into this co-creation phase with you. And people probably aren't gonna have that wild of ideas. It's gonna be things like what Nina brought up. I need to leave a little bit earlier. I need a little bit longer of a lunch. I kind of forgot what it means to be in traffic every day. And so figuring out how you can have grace with folks depending on the context of your community and the context of your team. I just practiced this with our team this year, regardless of who they are. So full-time staff, regardless of union, even down to intern, we looked back through their work agreements and we made the adaptions that we needed to, and then we made sure that we had that conversation and that we have those as a returning point, and we have like an asterisk in there that, as other things occur. So just wanted to kind of give a little bit of a, how that might work with your team. And then I also have accountability as an active care up here. So accountability can also get us into the kind of like, I need this done, this time, this date, or, a little bit more into that authoritative space. But what I mean by that is when you're caring about your team and creating an environment where care can be part of the conversation, you have to have some accountability in there too. And not the traditional, again, kind of like, let me be the parent figure in this conversation. I'm talking about accountability through a positive lens of, let's set the expectation together. So, okay, you're working from home. I don't see you. That's different. Still feels weird. I'm still getting over that. And I feel like I'm supposed to, I'm a little bit less seasoned maybe than some folks in the room in my career, supposed to be all adaptable and different ways to do work. But I still like to see my team sometimes. That's still a little weird for me, knowing that they're showing up. And so if you can set accountability and use a tool that works for your team to break down, we're still going to have shared expectations, but that might look differently than me seeing you show up and being in your office every day at 8 a.m. And I know people are at varying stages of thinking that through of how that's going to feel now, or are frustrated because you've got some people who turn into rock star work from home folks, and then you've got some people who are are you there? Are you still there? Are you working for us? So I think there's kind of a variation in finding how to do that with your team. So I just wanted to explain accountability, because I think sometimes accountability ends up getting into kind of the black and white HR conversation, which is well, you're going to do these things, or we're going to do pre-disciplinary, and then we're going to do a performance improvement plan. It's okay, well, how do we get out of that? Yes, HR is an important partner in these conversations, but how do you make sure that accountability is a term that is shared amongst your whole team and everybody feels like they're part of that word together? And I believe that's it. Did I forget anything on that?
I don't think so, but I was just going to add a little personal story so when I showed up at the city of Gresham, we had this culture of work as many hours as humanly possible until you're burnt out. That was the culture, and it's terrible. And I was I got to fix that. And I'm I'm the leader, so I need to role model that, right, as the city manager. And I will tell you, we've been successful. And the only reason I've been successful is because my city council supports it, right? They back me up when I say we can't do any more, right? This is the list of things you prioritize that we're going to work on, and that's as much as we can do. They back me up when I say I'm not going to work till 9 p.m. at night every night, because I'm not role modeling what we want for our own employees in our organization. And so as elected officials, you really do set the tone from the top, particularly your relationship with your direct reports. That's really helped me make sure that I have a good work culture in my organization. So I just wanted to add that personal anecdote.
Thanks, Nina. And then I remember what I was going to say, professionalism. I had it up there and then totally forgot to talk about it for too much. I think just, again, questioning what are you actually serving by having a definition of the term professionalism, and who is it benefiting and who is it burdening, especially with thinking about, coming back to the office, working from home. I'm sure you all have addressed some of these. Conversation we love having sometimes, dress code. It always comes up. And just that I use that as an example of thinking about, again, ways that we have learned that we can adapt and be comfortable doing work, and thinking about the flexibility that you can have with your team. And I use a really simple one. There may be other ones, but I'm just using dress code because I feel like that's something that just comes up so commonly as you're bringing people back to the work environment. And can some of those things have a little bit of an adaptation and flexibility from where you were before?
Okay, we're going to do exercise in 1 second, but one thing to just tag on to professionalism. Just another kind of angle to that is rethinking our expectations of what certain people should look like or what experience they should have in order to be in a position. I think it's easy, especially if you've worked in local government for a little while or you've been on council for a while, you maybe have an image of what a police chief looks like, what their path has been. What does a fire chief look like? What has their path been? How about an HR director? And the reality is the world we're working in is they might look and have different experiences than what you're expecting, and being open to people who absolutely can do a phenomenal job in these positions, but might not fit what your expectations are, or it might not be the way that that's always looked. So just keep an open mind, especially in today's market. Okay, so now let's do a little exercise. So this one, instead of pairs, you're going to talk in small groups. So maybe, half your table or whatever works for you. We'll make it work for your table. But what we want you to chat about is on this topic of how we get the work done. What have you seen work? What resonates with you on changes over the last few years that you've had to make in your organization that actually have been beneficial? What do you see as opportunities maybe in your own organizations to do differently around this topic of getting the work done? Okay, we're gonna give you a little bit to have a group discussion and go. Well, look at you all doing the hand raise. I mean, this is a success. We could just be done right now. Nailed it. Just kidding. Hope you're having some good conversations. I'm going to ask this front table to report out on a really cool thing that one city has done. So here, I'm going to give you the mic, though, for it's being recorded.
It's incredible. I'm not sure about that. Todd Fuller, Vail City Manager of Vail, Oregon. But just one of the things we talked about was the city of Vail bought an older bank, which had a drive-through. So during the pandemic, that was very beneficial that, we could lock our front doors, but people could still access City Hall, pay all their bills, do planning and zoning, and everything could go right through that drive-through. So sounds like Corvallis wants one now, too.
Very cool. This might be something we replicate across the state, huh? Drive through City Hall. Great example. I hope you had an opportunity to connect with some other good examples at your table. So we're going to transition from how the work gets done in today's complex environment to engagement and connection, which we all know is incredibly important in getting the work done. So we'll start with this quote from, anyone know Dr. Brene Brown? Dare to Lead's a great book if you haven't read it. I define connection as the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. I love that first part. So important. So we're going to start, I'm going to kick us off, then turn to Jessica to talk about authentic engagement. What we know, based on research, is there is a very low level of trust of government at all levels right now. And it might have nothing to do with anything that we did, right, at the local level. We're like, why are we getting blamed for all the things happening elsewhere? But that is the reality of the environment we're working in right now. And when we think about engagement as local governments, you're probably familiar with this. Traditionally, we're like, hey, community, what do you think about this project, right? Or like, what do you want in your park? It's very like project-specific engagement around a specific item. And what I think we're all recognizing that we need to focus on in order to build trust, be successful with our communities, is focus on engagement as building trust and connection, not just asking for input on a specific project or going to the community when we need something. It's focusing on trust and connection first. And that requires us to think a little bit differently about how we do engagement. And that applies to, I think, everybody in the room, whether you're an elected official doing engagement, a city manager, or city staff. We cannot continue to do things the way we've always done them on engagement. We used to have town halls in person. Does anyone remember like old school town halls? Does anyone still do some? Yeah? Nice. That's great. And how do we get other people involved who maybe can't show up to a town hall, right? They got kids, they got other things going on in their life. They don't have transportation to get to your town hall. Zoom, yes. Online meetings, yes, love it. All the ways that people can engage, it's important to think about all those ways and not just focus on one. And again, to not just focus on a specific project, but really having the connection and the trust building that we truly need. So I'm going to turn it over to Jessica, because I'm also going to say, I'm going to be very vulnerable and say, I don't have all the answers for how we do that, right? Because it's like, great, how do we build all the trust tomorrow? And I'm going to say, I'm trying to figure this out with you guys. So we're going to, of course, do another group activity, so maybe you all can share some great ideas. But I don't have all the answers either, but what I really wanted to emphasize is how important it is that we all work on this, and that everybody in the organization is working on it, whether you're an elected official, city manager, or city staff. So with that, I'll turn to Jessica.
Yeah, and I'm just going to be really brief and try to give one way that you might think about engagement from the community. And I know we've got commissions and committees, but I spend a lot of time thinking about representation and whose voice is in the room and who is not in the room. And you can define that in a lot of different ways, thinking about the population in which you serve in your community, and with who's within your organization. And so one of the ways that we've been really exploring, like giving opportunities for people to be part of the process, is using concepts of shared leadership. I think it's been tossed around a few times, collaborative leadership and things like that. But shared really in the sense of who has the power in the decision-making process, and really making sure that that's not just you and your leadership role. And I come up to the meeting and I make the decision. People bring me their ideas, and I make decisions and I leave. It's how do you bring other voices into the conversation? And so now we have all these flexible platforms, and folks, may be calling in or showing up in person, or a combination of the two, to these meetings. And I would hope, and I'm sure we're kind of still seeing stats, and maybe somebody in your organization is tracking, that you saw an increase maybe during the pandemic, because folks that maybe couldn't have gotten there before could participate in different ways. And I would hope that your team is thinking, how do we keep up engagement that we saw, if that was the case, and how do we keep having some of that flexibility for ways to engage? And so I would just offer shared leadership as a way to actually set up real authority for a group of people to come together. Maybe there's some people from your team, some people from the community, to do some of the decision making for you, and really have them be able to bring their recommendations to you. And that might be something that you already have in practice, or it totally freaks you out to bring a whole bunch of people in and be thinking about actual decision making. But I think that answers some of the question of being accountable to the needs of your community and keeping some of that engagement up. And I actually saw this play out in a really cool way. I'm at Portland State University, and I use this example, and I'm a little bit academic, so we're giving some different examples from where we kind of sit in our leadership role. We're an urban campus. We're in Southwest Portland, and with that comes a lot of different urban issues. And so one of the things that was being asked by different members of our community was, to arm our campus public safety or not. What do we do about this? And so our president decided we are going to do this process a little bit differently, because any way this goes, I'm either the good person or the bad person to whoever you are as a stakeholder. So this also kind of alleviates a little bit of the pressure of being the only voice that was, kind of looking at the pros and cons in front of you for the decision. So what they did is they formed a working group, short term, and they made sure that all the different types of folks in the community were represented, and they delineated all of the information that was available, and they did that throughout a 9-month period. So there was an end date, so the people that were not on that group had kind of an accountable expectation that they would have something at the end of that period. And they brought their recommendations back to the president and said, here's what we've heard from the community, here's all of the information, and we're gonna bring the recommendations back to you to make the decision. And so that really allowed, despite if you were an undergraduate student or sitting on the board of trustees, and again, I know I'm using university language, but think about the roles in your organization, everybody was part of the process and felt like they had a voice in that decision making and making that decision for campus. So I just wanted to kind of share how that's played out. And it also meant that on that working group, they had co-leads. So again, it wasn't just one person saying like, let's drive the project, let's drive the agenda. There was really a shared accountability and hearing from everybody as a individual contributor towards that collaboration. So I just wanted to share that as an option to maybe think about how to engage people differently. And you might be doing variations of that already within your organization.
Okay, so with that, what we want to do is to have a little activity again, and this time you're just going to do it with a partner and talk about this concept of shared leadership or different ways of engaging. What opportunities do you think you have in your organization to apply some of these principles, or what do you think you can be doing differently in terms of engagement to rebuild trust and connection in your community? So So I know that's a big topic. You can go any direction. I'm sure you can cover all of that in 5 minutes. But just to maybe start the conversation today with a partner, kind of get your brain thinking about these principles. Just a starting point for today. So I know we're really making you work in this session. You're never going to sign up for our session again. No, I'm just kidding. This is good. You're going to get a lot of good takeaways from today. All right. Make it happen. Go. I'm just going to end us on this section about engagement with a few newer concepts and ideas that I learned at the International City County Management Association conference last month. One is stipends. Does anyone do stipends for participation or engagement? No. Yes, in the back, thank you. We got one. So that is paying people, compensating people to some degree for their time, being involved and being engaged, particularly if it's an ongoing commitment. Think about your committees, where you're asking people to commit hours a month to participate. There certainly are people in our communities who cannot, quite literally, afford to do that, and we really need to be paying them in order for them to be able to actually participate. That is a barrier, is they don't have that luxury of free time. The other concept that's super new and like really interesting is this concept of civic lottery. So we traditionally like invite people to participate, right? We like put it on social media, we send you an email and we're like, hey, show up to this thing, or like join this, or take this survey, or we're inviting you to participate. Civic lottery, it's kind of like jury duty in concept. I know, it sounds bad, but basically you tell people, I am asking you to come to this thing. And sure, they don't have to come. It's not quite jury duty, right? You can't force them to, but instead of saying, here's an opportunity, now sign up, it's, here you go. Come on Tuesday. And the way people are doing it and why they're doing it is to get more representation from across communities, so you can randomly select a more diverse group of people that you intentionally send it to, right? So you can get different political party representation, age, gender, race, sex, you name it, and make sure that you have better representation. But it's a more direct ask, like we literally are asking you to show up, not an invitation to sign up to show up. And there's one great example. I don't even know how they pulled this off. Super cool. I want to look into it. A really big county did a telephone town hall where they randomly selected 50,000 people who were called on their cell phone for a telephone town hall. And sure, you could have hung up. I'm sure some people did, right? But some people probably stayed on the line and heard the news. You also could like volunteer to actually, call in yourself. But what a cool way and a different way of approaching civic engagement is not asking people to then have to like sign up to do something. So just want to leave you with a few new ideas that are out there. Let us know if you end up trying any of those, because I'm curious. But we're going to move on to our last section today, which is like personally my favorite. I love talking about this, which is how has leadership itself changed in today's environment? And so what we want to talk about is taking risks, being vulnerable, two scary things, thinking about how we solve problems, and being relational versus transactional. So how many of you would consider your organizations as like pretty risk-taking? Like, yeah, we try new things all the time. Not a lot of people, okay? Like 4, I got 4 in the room. Government is not known for being risky, and for a lot of reasons it makes sense, right? We have taxpayer dollars. We don't want to just like try all the new things tomorrow and waste a bunch of money, right? Fair. And also, a lot of the problems we're dealing with today, whether it's crime, violence, homelessness, whatever it is, are not going to be solved by us continuing to do the same thing. So we actually do need to try new things. So what I see most frequently that works well is pilot projects. Who loves pilot projects? A few of us. Pilot projects are a great way of encouraging your city to try something new, but it's not a long-term commitment. You could take it back if it doesn't work, right? And it's great with the community too, because it's also expressing to them, we're trying something new and we understand it may or may not work, so this might not last forever if it doesn't work. Pilot projects are a great way of going. And I will tell you, I think as we tackle some of these big things, and as you're trying to get important projects done in your community, it's asking your own staff, can we do this differently? Have we thought about how we can maybe approach this problem different than we have before? Have we thought about solving it in a different way? And then starting to ask specific questions. that get at trying something new. Okay, let's talk about vulnerability. Who thinks their organization is good at being vulnerable and showing vulnerability? Not a lot of us. How about personally? Are any of you feel comfortable expressing to your team or to your colleagues, I'm scared about this, I'm fearful about this, this is hard for me? Okay, now we get more hands, yeah. So we usually are better at expressing with each other what we're scared of, what we're nervous about, maybe what we're excited about, what's hard, what we're struggling with. But it's harder for us to show that in a big group, right? And it's harder for us to do that as an organization. And it's also incredibly important. I recently went to an event, and we got to hear from a group of high school students who just went through like a Civics 101 program. So they're really informed on what local government does. And we asked them, how do we communicate better to you, right? Like, how do we reach your generation? Help. How do we connect with you? And they're like, stop with these big government words. Stop putting on a show. Be real with us. Tell us what's working, what's not working, because we know not all this stuff is working. Like, we know, we see you. Stop pretending like it's all okay and making it look all pretty, shiny, and nice in a press release. That doesn't work for us. We want you to show up as yourselves, be honest, just like show up on a, not Facebook Live, because they're not on Facebook, but you know what I mean. And just actually be yourselves and be really truthful about what's happening, which is, again, not necessarily typically our forte as local government. So thinking differently about how we're even vulnerable in our own community, getting back to that trust and connection. Vulnerability builds trust and connection. When you can tell somebody else, I'm scared about this, you are automatically connected with someone on a totally different level than you would be. So think about how vulnerability plays a role in your community connections. And when you're actually talking to the community, being willing to share, I'm scared too. You're scared about your safety? I am too, right? And being able to just join in on those fears or those things that we're dealing with is incredibly important, as we heard from the high school students who we're trying to engage with. And then, of course, also in your organization. As leaders, we're the role model, right? We talked about that earlier with how we work, but also how we show up in our work. So if we're always like, everything's perfect, we don't have to worry about everything, team. Everything's great. We got no problems. No one believes that. Really, truthfully, nobody does. All of our organizations have challenges, and that's fair. We all do. They might be different, but we all have challenges. And being really honest about the fact that we do. And yeah, we have ways to deal with it and get through it together. But yeah, it's hard right now. Being honest is just incredibly important. So moving on to the next thing. I'm like, I could talk for days about this. Thinking about problem solving. So again, going back to those big problems or issues that your communities are seeing, you may be asked as a city to play in a space that's not a core service. Mental health. Anyone else? Like, does this happen to you? Happen recently? Like, the city all of a sudden is doing all these other things that we've never done before because someone needs to deal with it, right? Behavioral health, homelessness, whatever it is. So when we think about that, the reality is we're more used to playing in our own lane. Like, we got to solve a fire problem. The fire chief is going to solve the fire problem. But when you start thinking about these issues of mental health, behavioral health, homelessness, on and on and on, we shouldn't be just saying, hey, city staff, let's just figure this out on our own. Let's problem solve this on our own. We're not experts. This is not what we thought we were going to be doing, right? So we need to think about problem solving as a partner-based initiative. We need to be thinking more about how do we use the resources in our community outside of city government? How do we tap into resources across our region and our state to problem solve on a different level? Bring in different voices who are impacted by this issue or who maybe are service providers, right, in homelessness or mental health. People we probably actually don't normally talk to because we haven't had to, all of a sudden are really important partners for us. So it's important we think about problem solving differently, not just as something within city hall walls we can just get together and solve. We need people from the outside to help us problem solve. Absolutely necessary for some of these big challenges. And I'm gonna let Jessica touch on the last piece about relational versus transactional.
Yeah, just a really brief thing. And again, I know that we're scattering seeds on a lot of different soil, and some of you are like, yeah, we get it, we do that already. And for some of you are like, okay, like I could see how this could work. So I appreciate everyone kind of sticking with us as we're going through some terms that may be familiar or may be new. So I just wanted to make a point on the relational versus the transactional, and I think it's just reiterating again how to make those connections and not just sending the survey after survey after survey or just having town hall. Just thinking about different ways that you can, and I've seen a lot of folks do them, right? Like coffee with the mayor or having different opportunities for people to connect and build those relationships. So they really do see you as a partner in the problem solving instead of just, I got another flyer about something or another notice from the city. So really thinking about new ways that you can do that as a team and really meet people where they're at. So that was just a comment on that. All right, well, we're gonna take it home with some takeaways because I'm keeping an eye on because we made a time commitment and want to get you through and on to what is next. And I wanted to bring in Adrienne Marie Brown. If you're a book person and feel like I'd really like to kind of, some of these things are resonating and you're wanting to read more, one of the thinkers out there that really does inspire a lot of how we're thinking about teaching leadership to emerging leaders is emergent strategy. And Adrienne Marie Brown, that this quote is, "I believe that we are part of a natural world that is constantly changing, and we need to learn to adapt together and stay in relationship if we hope to survive as a species." So I just really wanted to bring that back. All right, so I got a lot up here. So I'm gonna go ahead and kind of read through them because I'm recognizing that this font is a little bit smaller than what I meant it to be. But you can see as I get excited about like, ooh, here's ways that you might think about taking action. You also just sat with us for over an hour and it's like, oh, content, and I'm getting ideas from the shared knowledge in the room. So I'm gonna kind of try to bring us back to some key things that you might try. And again, I recognize some of you are like, yep, got it, doing that with my team, but I hope that there's something in here that makes you think about something a little bit differently, or maybe gives you vocabulary different than what you've been using with your team, because there's always a new acronym or a new leadership book. So again, just kind of giving folks something they can take with them. So the first one I've got up here is setting the tone. We already did the grounding and mindfulness as a group. We tried that. For some of you, you were like, oh, I like this. I kind of breathed a little bit, came back, like got myself grounded. For some of you were like, I hated that. I never want to do it again. Please don't make us do that in a session. But really thinking about the power that you have in every space that you come into, whether that's virtual or in person. You may be like my organization, which some days I'm doing the Zoom marathon is what our team calls it. And I am on for 60 minutes and I click off, goodbye, click back up, good, hello everybody, and start the next conversation. And there's zero time for being human. Like it's like we went virtual and then we're like, we're officially AI now and we're robots and we don't need any of our needs met. That's not true. And we know that's not true because I'm sure everyone's had a variation of like, did I drink water today? Did I use the bathroom? When's the last time I did these things? Or I completely didn't eat because now apparently 12 p.m. Zoom calls are a thing because it's just another opportunity to smush that meeting in. In person, we used to have the hallway meetings. Like I'd be walking between meetings or like come out of the bathroom and, I'm in another meeting, like as I'm walking through the hallway. And I know that there's variations of that depending on where you're at. So thinking about that you have the power to set the tone. So one tool, again, that you might use for that is the grounding and mindfulness. Maybe, it's going to look different depending on the trust that you have built with the people that you're meeting with. But if you're convening the meeting and you're facilitating the meeting and bringing people into the conversation with you, set the tone. Maybe that is, you know what? It's 2 p.m., it's after lunch. I'm just going to say that we're going to turn all of our cameras and mute for 5 minutes. Everybody go do their thing. Maybe that's changing the load of laundry, or that's, petting a cat for a couple minutes, using the bathroom, grabbing some water, coffee, because now you're in that like post-lunch, like, oh, I'm exhausted. But really saying like we are gonna take that 5 minutes and really make sure that we are checking in with each other's humanness and bringing it back to, yes, we have a million things that we need to get done, but we still need to check in with each other as humans and build that connection. Another thing that you could do, and maybe your organization already does this, instead of having the 60-minute meetings, we know that the 60-minute meeting, the 1 hour, is never really 1 hour. It creeps typically into the next one, and then you're like halfway through your day and you're like mounting lateness because you're trying to hop from one thing to the next, or you're doing hybrid and some things are Zoom and some things are in person. and you forgot that how long it takes you to walk from one office to this other area, that you're now having a meeting, whatever you're at in that kind of transitional period of what we're doing right now. Bring the meetings down to 45 minutes to 50 minutes. Most calendaring techniques or technology that's out there will allow you to preset that. So whoever's doing your scheduling, if someone does that for you, or if you're doing that yourself, just set that as the preset, because we already know that it's gonna go over 5 to 10 minutes, or you're gonna need a couple minutes to use the bathroom or fill your water bottle. Just preset that, and set that expectation for everyone that you're partnering with as well. We did the comfort breaks, or silence. That's another thing that I've seen some teams do. Just, you're taking in information all day. Just give everybody a couple minutes of silence. You know, if, you can encourage people, again, depending on who you're meeting with, and if it's, your team and you're checking in. Maybe some people like to meditate, some people like to pray on your team, some people just want a minute to look back at their notes, to remember, a couple key things that they were processing. You have the ability to set that tone and give them that time. The last one, asking folks for their access needs, and that includes, hey, everybody, we're gonna check in with each other, and it could be part of your introductions. And does anybody have any access needs today? What do you need to be in this space and be an active participant during our time together? And what that looks like typically in my team is I have some folks that want to have the transcription turned on so they can read as along with our meetings. That might look like, I'm so glad that you asked, I've been feeling really dehydrated today, and I'm gonna probably be getting up and leaving a couple times to refill my water bottle. So just giving people, again, that ability to speak up for what they need. And again, that might be really surface level in some conversations, depending where you're at with those folks, or it might get a lot deeper of I'm just having a really bad day. And I'm that's what I'm bringing to this meeting. I'm trying to be present with you, but again, practicing a little bit of that vulnerability, it allows people to kind of giving them permission to show up where they're at in their day. The next one is to stop grasping for back to normal. I think that there's still people that are kind of reconciling, really just wish we'd go back to normal. It was just, I knew what the expectations were, I knew what the rules were, I knew the kind of the norms and how to operate within that space. But the more that you grasp at that, the less likely you're gonna be able to move on and make the adaptations that your team and your community needs from you. I mentioned it earlier. I would say the one thing I'm going to highlight from here is to co-create the new norms. I talked about that a little bit earlier. So again, you have kind of the high-level organizational values, but can you adapt some new values and say, hey, we're coming through this time. We just had this huge experience together for the last couple of years. Or you're coming in as a new leader with a team that you haven't previously worked with before in this weird environment, and can then go ahead and check in with them of what do we need to adapt? What are the kind of elephants in the room around the way that we get the work done that maybe aren't working for the team anymore? And really bringing those out in the open, and then being able to co-create, again, using that co-creation so that they're part of the decision-making process. And then you're bringing them in to have those shared expectations. And really what comes out of that is positive accountability, because then it can say, hey, we're gonna come back. Our team, for example, we have core values. We have 8 core values. We start all of our team meetings coming back to our values, because it reminds us of our why and what our purpose is. So again, if you have the vague, I should probably know what PSUs are because I'm an employee there, but I don't have those memorized. So they're there, and they're kind of guiding what we do. But does your team have values of how you show up for each other, how you get the job done, how you show up for community? So really thinking about how you can co-create those. Embrace the flexibility that we talked about. Typically, doing things differently comes with a lot of discomfort. And I know I've got some folks in here who have been seasoned, and they're like, this wasn't my first crisis as a leader. We've done a lot of crisis management throughout. But the more that you, I don't really enjoy using the term lean in, but the more that you kind of come into making those adaptions, the better off that you're gonna be, and the way that you're going to be able to bring in the positive accountability. And my personal favorite with this right now, especially since these look different, is hill, skill, and will. So I know, acronyms and little phrases. So is it a hill that they have so that they have a barrier in their way of getting the work done? Is it skill? They just don't know how to. Or is it will? And they're like, actually, like, I'm really like part of the some of the quiet quitting type stuff that's going on, and I'm just feeling really disengaged. And being able to kind of suss that out in conversation. I know flexibility is your thing, so I'm looking at you just to make sure that there's nothing else, that you wanted in there. Center on purpose, I asked these questions a couple times in the presentation. Who benefits? Who is burdened? Who is most impact? So again, if you're thinking about your values, but then you're thinking about who you're serving, really coming back to those 3 questions. Another acronym to actually, if you are a acronyms person, I use these when I'm thinking about convening project teams, or when I'm doing one-on-ones with team members. And so you can do GRIPE. We're gonna have a GRIPE every week. We're gonna talk about our goals, our roles, our processes, and our expectations. So I sometimes like to use that. Again, you can use some humor depending on, who your team member is and what the relationship is with the people that you're meeting with. And then POP, which is making sure that we have a purpose, an outcome, and a process to get there. So I feel that those are very adaptable across different conversations. And then the last one, again, coming back to thinking about using that shared leadership model of bringing in different people to the conversation, maybe stipending their work if that's something that you can allocate funds towards. And then that will really allow you to have different voices with different lived experience in the conversation, and again, across all the things that we talked about. So I'm gonna pause there for last thoughts from Nina.
My last thought is we need to take a selfie. So, okay, Jessica, come back. All right, everybody, look excited. Look like you're alive. Ready? Woohoo! Thank you so much for taking the time today to spend with us. Jessica and I would love to connect with you, so please feel free to connect with us after the session. You can find us on LinkedIn. Yes, okay, good. I think we have like 5 minutes, so we can do a quick Q&A if you guys want to, but that's that. Done. Woo! Oh, we already have a question. That was quick. Wait, I got to give you the mic.
This is for you. Are you going to upload the slides to the, okay, good.
Yes, we will make sure the slides are available to you all. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'll also include a little bit of a reading list too. So if folks want to dive deeper into anything, I threw a lot of terms out there, and then again, just wanted to kind of stay kind of in the scattered seeds stage of knowledge, and then allow people to kind of do what they needed to, but wanted to also keep it non-lectury and academic. So I will include a little bit of that information if you are one of those people that likes to dive in further.
Awesome. I think MC Kevin's back. Woo woo! MC Kevin!
No, I'm not going to do it. I had a moment there. I just wanted to say thank you to Nina and Jessica. Great job. Also, thank you to HomeServe for their sponsorship. Up next at the conference, we have a 30-minute break and then the keynote address, and welcome is happening next door. That'll feature our keynote speaker, Eric Kleinenberg. That starts at 3 o'clock. Thanks, everybody. And by the way, that Michael Jackson music, that wasn't my fault either, so.